Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. This is Kayla Hayward with the American Hospital Association, and I'm pleased to be moderating today's webinar, Wired for Wellness, Empowering Secure Connected Care. Today's event is sponsored by Cox Business. We'll begin today's webinar with a presentation, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for questions. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by selecting the Q&A feature you see on your screen. We'd like the session to be interactive, so we are looking forward to hearing your questions. If at any time you're having trouble with audio, please try refreshing your browser. You may also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box. At this time, I'd like to thank today's webinar sponsor, Cox Business. Hospitals today face growing challenges as they work to modernize digital infrastructure and maintain cybersecurity. In today's webinar, you'll gain practical insights into how healthcare organizations are tackling these challenges through smarter network design and technology integration. We'll also uncover ways to deliver patient experience that feel more personal and connected. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce you to today's speakers. Eric Flock, Director of Vertical Solution Sales with Cox Business. Miles Tanner, Director of Healthcare Cloud and Security with RapidScale. And Troy Roussel, Enterprise Manager with Cox Business. A warm welcome to all of our speakers. I'll now hand it over to Miles to begin today's presentation. Welcome, Miles.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla. Appreciate it. Thank you all for taking the time with us today. We appreciate your investment, and we look forward to an interactive and valuable session together. So let's start with the star of the show. The star of the show is Jack. So we're going to follow the journey of a patient as we talk through the connected care, and we want to make sure that we maintain continuity as we talk through from the patient's perspective, because we can all resonate with that. So Jack is a father of two, he's a husband, and he's a sole provider for the family. Mid-30s, and he's been admitted for an unexpected surgical procedure. So we can all identify with Jack, and we're going to continue to talk about Jack as we walk through our presentation today.
Thanks, Miles. We know who Jack is now and why he's here, but what does he expect when he walks through your doors? Some expectations remain unchanged from past years, like being seen promptly, but some things have changed dramatically. Not only does he want to be seen promptly, he also wants to know, where is he in the queue? How soon is he going to be seen? Is he first? Is he 10th, 15th, second? How long will he be in that waiting room? Whether it's waiting pre-op, post-op, our hope is that he doesn't feel like he's in a totally foreign environment and that he has the creature comforts as if he were in his own home. So whether it's like in-room entertainment, being able to watch sports live, how many times have you filled out a health survey and then walked through the next set of doors and had to answer the exact same kind of questions again? And you just kind of wonder, do they know what they're doing? Why are they asking me this? I just answered that question. And, people may wrongly attribute it to the nurse or practitioner who didn't read the notes, but really it might not even be their problem. It might just be, disjointed systems that's preventing them providing the excellent care that we all nowadays expect from a healthcare facility. So as we look at these, we ask questions like, what can you do to reduce stress, improve outcomes, right from the very start, and make sure that everyone has trust in your facility moving forward?
That's great, Eric. I just add on, and experience matters. The experience for clinicians and especially patients. So definitely in this case.
So what's at stake? Patient care. 32% are reporting setbacks due to cumbersome support channels. Whether it's something like refilling prescriptions, how many times have you made a phone call, got the robo dialer, and talked to someone trying to say, what prescription do you want to fill? What's the order number? And you just kind of get lost in that system. So making sure that these are working properly and taking advantage of AI to make sure that everything is logical and easy for people to use. Like those are kind of like key critical components to make sure that everyone is happy with the service that's being delivered. Anytime people feel stranded, get thrown in a circle from dialing, like that's where frustration sets in, and that's where accidents can happen, mistakes can be made, or delays in treatments can happen. So those are things that we all want to make sure that we're trying to avoid. The next one is a really tough one. Staff burnout. 1 in 3 nurses identify the electronic health record systems as a reason for burnout. Having to type things repeatedly in different systems, things that shouldn't be taking the advantage of a specialized, intelligent, passionate person, you know, manually keying things in multiple times. It's not a great use of their time. Actually, it's a terrible use of their time after that first data entry. So making sure that these folk are being supported from both the leadership level and systematic level. So when we talk about leadership, 80% of organizations cite that technology is a barrier to innovation. And staff burnout, some of that is attributed to feeling like they don't have a voice. So if leadership is saying, you know what, we realize we have a problem, our systems aren't working at peak efficiency, and it's causing you extra stress during your day, we hear you now, and we were working on a solution. So even if the solution isn't fully baked, like them hearing and knowing that you see it, you understand it, and are trying to get a path forward, that will speak volumes to helping to reduce the burnout and increase your leadership presence.
Yeah,
Hey, Eric.
definitely.
I'm sorry, Miles, but I just wanted to jump in here because I can tell you that personally, I am married to a nurse, and when I tell you that the EHR burnout is real, it's a real thing. She's been in as a nurse for the last 20 plus years, and the changes in the EHR systems are so rapid, and they're so constant over the last 5 or so years, that it's a real thing. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that I personally have a story of how that burnout is real. So
Yeah, thank you, Troy, and always advocating on the clinicians. That's important to all of us, and of course the patients too. So even on the stat there with 32% of patients reporting health setbacks, you think about value-based care, you think about the impact of the bottom line of the organization, and of course that patient experience that we all know is the gold standard. I just wanted to stand on that point a bit more. And then on the last one for leadership, we're all being asked to do more with less. There's continuous budget challenges. There's always strategic technology initiatives that are being asked of us. And outdated tech, technical debt, it stands in the way. And obviously with 80%, majority of us agree with that. And so there are real challenges, and that doesn't mean that we can't solve them. So now we're going to transition into a poll. We want to hear from you so that we can make sure and tailor some of this conversation to what you see as your most current focus. So the poll should have popped up, and now's your time to select. So we could choose from, and you get one choice. So we all know that we want to do everything. We're usually being asked to do everything. But in this case, choose one, please. So we've got coordinated patient care. We've got reducing system complexity, cybersecurity posture, budget reduction, and finally, business continuity, disaster recovery, so BCDR. So what is your organization's most current focus? And it may come down to what the last conversation you had was, because you probably talked about all of these in the last couple of days, if not today. All right, we've got the poll results. All right, with the astounding lead, we've got coordinated patient care. Excellent, because that is the primary topic of our conversation. Reducing system complexity, always important. And then we've got budget reduction. So in cybersecurity posture is always wrapping everything to it. And you can't do anything without hitting your budget numbers. So great feedback, thank you. So the overall answer is coordinated patient care. So we'll continue to focus on that element. So now let's talk a little bit about that. So patient care in a fractured system. So When we have fractured systems, it's extremely difficult to coordinate care for our patients. And so in this case, Jack, the star of the show here, his vitals were taken 3 times in 2 hours because the systems couldn't talk to each other. So you put yourself in Jack's shoes, you start to question your care. You put yourself in Jack's shoes and you have that uncomfortability in experience. And then obviously that carries forward into the clinicians and the temperature of the room, how they're addressed and what Jack is feeling at that moment, because feelings are real. So a disconnected experience, a lot of it is reliance on disconnected applications, right? So they're not connecting into a single data warehouse or data lake that's sharing the information all to the right information or the right people through the right systems at the right time. Hours wasted daily on duplicative data entry, and then of course patient frustration, which mentioned before. So it's the experience matters, it's real, it generates the perception, and we all know perception is reality. And then we've got systemic problems, right? So disjointed systems creating workflow inefficiencies. So in this case, obviously, we're having to duplicate tests. And so there are financial implications to that, of course, tied to the experience of the patient, experience of the clinicians, and their problems that can be solved. So staff frustration, we heard about that. And then I'm going to jump right to patient care impact, right? So, in Jack's shoes, when you have additional stress, right, you have less confidence, then that is going to impact your outcome. That's going to impact your experience. And so we all know it's extremely important, and probably tying back to why that's the number one priority of everybody on this call by a wide margin. And then the greater risk for errors and poor outcomes. So kind of tying back to the value-based outcomes or value-based care and tying back to what is most important is providing the care that Jack deserves and the outcomes that we all expect.
Thank you, Miles. And one of the questions that we received during registration was like, can you provide a real world example? So let's kick one off right here. And this is one where located in Louisiana, Richland Parish Hospital for the past 89 years serves Northeast Louisiana. It began as a small clinic and it's grown into a full service hospital with 6 locations, providing critical healthcare services to the rural communities. So they face significant issues. And Miles, can you walk us through those?
Yeah. And this is a huge passion for us at Cox Business and Rapid Scale because of the impact it has on our constituents, right? Everybody in America who lives in a rural area depends on rural care. It's critical. And, we all know on this, we talked through the poll, some of the challenges being faced with, there's no shortage of challenges in rural health and specifically for Richland. So in this example, we engaged directly with Richland Parish Hospital to help solve some very important problems. So first of all, from a communication standpoint, we had a lot of challenges. They were not able to stay connected to the internet, and their phone systems were unreliable to the extent that their frontline clinicians were giving out their personal cell phones numbers and communicating directly with patients because their phone lines would go down, because their internet would go down. So obviously that's a huge impact to the patients, huge impact to the clinicians, and it's table stakes. You have to have reliable connectivity and reliable communications. And so we delivered that through an SD-WAN solution where we built in redundant internet connections at each location. And we have automated workflows that would run traffic through both circuits and maintain that continuity. Also, what we did is we leveraged the SD-WAN platform to prioritize all of the traffic appropriately. So we provided QoS where voice was always prioritized over every other application. And through doing that, we're able to maintain 5 nines of uptime of the internet and completely remove that risk of using personal cell phones to do what they needed to do for their patients. So there's a huge impact on some of the foundational building blocks of what is required to deliver care today, and that generally is a challenge in rural America. Also, that we have cybersecurity challenges, right? So in addition to compliance challenges, so what we helped Richland Parish with were to deploy a 24/7 SOC and NOC. So our 24/7 network operations center tied to their internet connectivity, right? So we're able to monitor, alert, remediate, and ultimately automate their internet connectivity between their clinics, hospital, and out to the internet through our private data center and to other SaaS applications. So that was our NOC services with SD-WAN. Then what we also layered on top of that is a 24/7 SOC. So what we're doing is managed detection and response, and we're doing that across their entire perimeter. So when I'm saying perimeter, I'm talking about their network. So what we're doing is we're pulling in logs from all of their firewalls that we're running SD-WAN off of, and we're using all of that data, all those logs to correlate and identify real-time security risk and security issues, active exploits, and we're working to remediate that automatically. And we have that built into our runbooks. So we're protecting the perimeter with managed detection response. Now, in addition to the perimeter, what we're also protecting are the end users. So there's a lot we're doing from a compliance standpoint to help them with their HIPAA compliance through their Microsoft 365 deployment and Defender, also through email security protection. But from a managed detection and response perspective, what we're doing is we're pulling all of that Microsoft log data, we're correlating that real time, eyes on glass, identifying if there's impossible login scenarios or other individual credentials that may have been exploited, so that we could isolate and protect that end user from going in and going further in and unfortunately doing a ransomware attack or any other of the usual exfiltration that they're looking to do. So we're protecting the perimeter, we're protecting the end users, and we're protecting the infrastructure. So what we're also doing with Richland Parish is we're providing hosted services. So we're delivering private hosting for their critical workflow applications. And of course, as a part of that, we're delivering backup services and disaster recovery services so that if something does happen, either physically or through a cyber event, we're able to restore in a matter of moments instead of many, many days, which we'll talk more about in a minute. But the case study will walk through a little bit more of those details. Ultimately, though, we're protecting the network, the perimeter, the end users, and the infrastructure across their entire environment. So we're running the 24/7 NOC services for networking and 24/7 SOC services for cyber so that we're able to automate workflows, we're able to engage when we need to engage, protect when we need to protect, and ultimately we maintain continuity and keep Richland Parish up and running so the clinicians can deliver the care that their rural constituents depend on.
And Miles, I looked at the titles of the attendees, and they may not know what the 5 nines are.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So 5 nines. So 5 nines is 99.999% uptime.
So, that's a stellar number that we are very, very happy to tout.
Absolutely. And part of our SLAs. Yeah, great call out, Eric. Thank you. All right. So the hidden costs of disconnection. So let's go back to Jack, right? You saw the real life example of Richland Parish, which you could download and read more about. And so from Jack's perspective, his care team is stuck toggling between systems and repeating tests. So it's wasting resources, time, and it increases stress for Jack. So duplicate testing today costs hospitals over $20 billion annually. So there's real financial implications to this. Mentioning before on budget impacts, everybody's being faced with them, and duplicate tests do not help. Also, what's slowing teams down? So I mentioned the automation of the network and automation of the managed detection response cybersecurity solutions that we deploy. There's a lot of manual work that goes on that could be automated, but staff spend 30% of their day on manual admin work. And so the staff doesn't want to do this, right? They'd rather be doing what they care about, helping patients, delivering great outcomes and great experiences. But they end up doing a whole bunch of manual admin labor, and it's slowing them down.
Miles, before you talked about like the data lakes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So one of the ways that we work together to deliver connected care is we take disparate systems. So you've got your EHR, you've got other systems that may be out there. And what we do is we put those together, we build the pipes. So think the plumbing, and then we host a data lake, right, where that information goes into one place, and then we're able to act on that data. We're able to provide insights on that data, where one of the many things that we do to act on the data is to automate workflows. So as we do data correlation and we automate, if it could be, data sets that may be coming in via documentation, if it's, pre-approvals, if it's, there's a whole bunch of other automated systems and automated ways to remove this manual work, but it all starts with the data lake. So everybody knows about AI and all that great stuff, but automation is a step before AI. And generally most hospital systems really need that automation piece. In order to automate it, you got to start with a data lake. You got to bring all the data into one place and you have to make it usable. That's the key.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. So I'll start off here and then Eric, I'm going to hand it back to you a little bit. So the modern healthcare backbone. So you heard a real life example with Richland Parish and some of the challenges there. And, you understand and you're thinking from Jack's perspective, his experience. So, how do we continue to deliver a great experience and improve that experience? And one of the main ways is to have that effective backbone of technology for healthcare. So it all starts with secure, reliable infrastructure. So this isn't just for performance of your EHR, right? So no spinning wheels, improved login time, all of that. But when it's secure, then it stays up and running, right? And then also it's reliable and it meets the compliance standards. So you're reducing risk, improving experience. And so ultimately, it is one of the key building blocks of the modern healthcare backbone. And that also ties back to cyber resiliency. So you heard me mention a bit about Richland Parish and how, as our secure infrastructure we're delivering for their critical workflows, we're also doing immutable backups and disaster recovery services. So what we're able to deliver is a resilient infrastructure. So it works effectively and it runs production environments. But if something happens, we have reliable, immutable backups that we could restore from. And we also provide the cavalry that comes over the hill to help restore systems if they go down. We provide isolated inventory or isolated recovery environments. And, ultimately, that's something that everybody should be focused on as a part of your modern backbone is your secure, reliable infrastructure. And then what's going to happen when you need to rebuild? Do you have the right run books? And then also, do you have the right isolated recovery environments and the capacity in order to rebuild when you need to? So as a part of resiliency, infrastructure is key. And then the last one I'll talk about on the slide here is the scalable infrastructure. So I mentioned capacity. Capacity is an issue. There's just a constant increase in the demand for data and compute and resources in order to deliver innovative care and effective care. And so for your infrastructure to be scalable, to be able to handle that increased demand and have the agility without having to commit very significant capital resources in order to make it happen. And then what that does too, and tying back to the data lake that we were talking about a second ago, that helps enable AI-driven workflows and automation. And so two really important pieces to the modern healthcare backbone.
Yep. And building on that, you can have as much internet as you want, but if you can't get it to the patients, or to your staff, that is a huge, huge limiter. I mean, the iPhone sends me report saying like you've been on your phone for X hours on average this week, and it is an embarrassingly large number. But going into different facilities and you get like 1 bar of service, and you log on to the Wi-Fi and it's really slow. That is something that a device that is just synonymous with living now, unfortunately, or fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, right? But making sure that there's robust connectivity going into the buildings, but then throughout the buildings. We know that with hospitals, there's lots of concrete sometimes, there's medical equipment. So making sure that you're getting things that aren't interfering with the medical devices is, utmost critical importance. But just being able to, again, provide that creature comfort that you have at home, being able to call a loved one, say, you know what, I'm about to go into surgery, but I'm feeling, a little nervous, and being able to have them say, you're going to be okay, and those kinds of little things, make a huge impact on like the soul and the person and the overall patient experience. So we want to make sure that, Wi-Fi connectivity, isn't an issue in this day and age. Unified staff communication, Miles mentioned before, if doctors having to give out their personal cell phone numbers because the systems go down, that is a bad disaster kind of scenario. I mean, doctors are, they are passionate people, and they will absolutely give out cell phone numbers. But at the end of the day, we don't really want them to have to give out their cell phone numbers. We want them to be able to use their work lines. So that way, when they are off, they can spend the time with the family, recharge, and be fresh and, on their A game, doing whatever they need to do, whether it's a surgery or assessments. So making sure that you have reliable staff communication, again, is of utmost importance, especially when urgent messages need to be relayed from one person to another. Getting a busy signal, like, that hard beep, 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 like that is not acceptable in this environment, right? We need to make sure that someone's able to get through, talk to the people they need to, especially if there's an emergency. Heaven forbid there's an emergency and they get the beep, beep, beeps. That is just, a disaster kind of scenario that should be avoidable. And then the robust fiber network. A robust fiber connectivity, fiber is glass, and glass is better than the copper-based services that we've seen in the past, but it moves a lot of data, it moves a lot of data fast, and it's pretty much infinitely scalable. Having good fiber connectivity and hopefully redundant capacities, so if one goes down, you have a backup, so that way you're always up and running and able to talk to your EHR systems, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. Those are all critical to ensuring just like day-to-day, movement of the hospital or of your facilities. Miles, Troy, did I miss anything on that?
I would add in that you hit all the great points, Eric, is, the modern infrastructure today, the modern backbone is generally hybrid, where we've got some workflows that are being run local on-prem, you've got some running in private, maybe a colo space, you got some running SaaS, maybe some running in your public cloud. But to have that robust, automated, secure connectivity to those resources, they make all the difference for experience for the end users. And in many cases, they have to be reliable and scalable in order to meet all the future demands of what we're looking for. So that agility is critical, but we all know you can't perform unless you have that robust and appropriate connectivity.
Thanks, Miles. So it works, and here's the proof. Epic's article regarding virtual nursing, and I don't know about you, but I had the fortune once to be able to go to a hospital and see telemedicine like firsthand. So in rural Nevada, I was in Reno or Vegas at the time, and in rural Nevada, I was able to hear the heartbeat of the nurse doing a demo for me with one of their patients, and it was the wildest thing to be able to put on a stethoscope and hear on the other end 100 miles away what was going on. But virtual nursing and being able to reduce the amount of beds that are needed to run the hospital, it made some significant savings over here. And that this number here was $6.3 million, assuming that the average bedside nurse was making around $44,000 per year. The other, significant benefits was that there was a 22% decrease in patient triage time. So people just waiting around, 22%, that is a significant number. And that's the kind of number that's going to improve overall patient happiness and satisfaction. Likewise, there was a 35% reduction in documentation, and that allowed the clinicians to spend more time with their patients, where, all that kind of like bonding time really, really plays importance in, patient happiness.
Yeah, and I'll add in two points. One is, right, there's no silver bullet. We know that, but it's all about incremental improvements, and technology can be some of those critical incremental improvements. And so, like in this case, Eric, you walked through it great, where we have nurses that they have the option to provide virtualized care even within the facility. So it's virtualized infrastructure, virtualized desktops, where they could remote in and they could support patients, but then they could document at the same time, and it saves them all of those steps throughout the hospital. And then they're able to be more efficient how they deliver, and then the patients get the care that they deserve. So I highly encourage you to read through the article. It's a great example of an innovative way to leverage technology and harnessing the power of that strong backbone that you have deployed in your infrastructure as your infrastructure.
I know, and I live near a Mayo Clinic, and I can tell you that going from like one building to another is like 20 minutes on a good day. So, being able to use virtual care and being able to, cut that time down, it's significant.
Mhm. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about cyber. We love to hate it, we hate to love it, and Jack is very aware of it, although he has no idea of how much really goes into cyber resiliency, what the long-term strategic planning is, what the day-to-day operations are. But ultimately, Jack just wants his patient information secured, and he wants it accessible. And we all know that's part of our compliance requirements. We have to be able to deliver that. And ultimately, Jack has that expectation. So unfortunately, the state of healthcare cybersecurity today is 92% of healthcare orgs experience a cyber attack in the past 12 months. That's pretty much everybody. So there's just active attacks always going on, and now especially with bots that are out there, we're starting to see some more agentic AI type cyber events. It's only going to continue to exponentially increase, which it has, and it's the reality that we live in. Now, part of this is the average downtime. So if you get hit with a ransomware, the average downtime is 19 days. So remember, that's the average. So if you have a resiliency strategy, you have disaster recovery plans, you have practiced run books where you know who owns what, who's supposed to do what, and you're able to identify gaps and have that practice to be able to restore and recover, and also inspection of your backups, inspection of all of your platforms and systems and tools, then you could bring that average downtime day down, right? So we can't completely stop the attackers, but as a part of our cyber resilience strategy and what we can do every day is to ultimately have the layered security solutions, to have the practice, to have the run books, so that we could have that downtime down to a matter of minutes, instead of on the further end of the downtime, right? Much less 19. There's many that have been down for months at a time because they don't have the layered security to protect, but then most importantly is the run books and the practice restoration to get those critical systems up and running so that our clinicians can provide the care that Jack and others expect. So it's obvious to say, but downtime equals delayed care equals patient risk, right? So going back to Jack and what he cares about, it's not just his perception and experience, but ultimately we all know when we don't have resilient systems, then that impacts patient outcomes.
And then the risk, the cyber risk, it's not just purely digital, it's also operational. When we talk about technology, hackers out there, they often will scour using bots to figure out, what things are touching the internet that is using an outdated operating system, where companies have decided, what, we're not supporting that technology anymore. And what that does is, with the increased ability to configure and run scripts using AI in the evil form, they're able to figure out, here's a set of technology that we know is outdated. Here's an exploit that we can use to do it. And if we're running end-of-life technology out there that isn't being supported, that is a huge risk factor for an organization. We know budgets are exceptionally tight, especially nowadays. People are always looking to stretch the dollar further, and a lot of times that could be with infrastructure and using technology that really should have been shelved and benched and updated with the latest tech specs for protecting data. So that is definitely a key concern. The Internet of Medical Things, expanding the attack surface. How many devices are now in hospitals that are using the internet? Exponential, right? Pretty much every digital machine now, whether it's taking pulses, taking pictures, cameras, CAT scans, whatever it may be, like most of those are now pushing those images through different software and routing it through the internet and two different systems. So that way you're able to take that data, hopefully put in that data lake for it to be consumed and then processed and put into the right categories and buckets to make sure that everything is working efficiently and well. Basic cyber hygiene and compliance requirements. between FERPA and SIPA and HIPAA. We have to make sure that everything that's touching the internet is encrypted, protected, and safe. That isn't a nice to have, it is a need to have. And and by law, making sure that everything that's going over an internet circuit being safe for traffic and personal data, of course, that is of the utmost importance. And definitely not talking about the folks here who took the poll, but business continuity, disaster recovery, that ranked 0 on the poll that we showed today. And that's something that's overlooked way too often. Being able to identify the fact that if something happens, what are we going to do? No one expects a natural disaster to happen. No one expects lightning to strike a data center. No one's really planning for that as much as we should be and could be doing. So being able to do dry runs of taking the time out to do something where let's run a mock simulation that says here's what's going to happen if this if this kind of attack occurs, or if this outage kind of occurs. But making sure that something's written in place, so that way you're not wasting critical minutes, hours, and days trying to remediate something where if you had an action plan, you would have known the first thing you need to do, shut that door down, close this port, whatever it may be. And then end user risk mitigation. One of the softest spots in any kind of facility are the people, right? I worked at a nonprofit in DC, and 2 years after working there, I got a physical letter on April 1st. I was really hoping it was an April Fool's Day joke, but it wasn't. And it essentially said that an HR person had emailed my W-2 to a bad actor. They thought it was the HR VP was asking for this, and the person went, took these folders, put them into an email, shipped them off, and now then I got free credit monitoring for the next 2 years. But that luckily for me, it was just my social security number. But when we're talking about health records, that is absolute things that we do not want just floating out there for someone to put on the black market.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more, Eric, on the end users. We just need to help protect them from themselves. We know that they want to deliver the care that they're there as a purpose to deliver. But to tie back to the Richland Parish example, to make sure I'm giving real life examples here. So some of the things we're doing to help, and what they're doing to help mitigate end user risk, is deploy a platform, a managed platform that is protecting them from getting those phishing attacks that are going to pretend to be the VP of HR that's going to try and convince you to urgently send a W-2 or to make a payment. So one, it's stopping the emails from coming in, but then also as a part of that is identifying who your highest risk users are. So you've got multiple thousand or maybe multiple hundred end users in your environment. Who's your riskiest ones? And do you have automated ways that are going to nudge them and say, hey, this is an unprotected website, you probably shouldn't do this, or hey, this looks a little risky, you probably shouldn't do this. And so what we've done with Richland Parish is we've deployed that managed system that is going to identify your highest risk individuals. It's going to protect them from those phishing attacks and malicious emails, and ultimately helping to reduce that attack surface and the overall risk that an end user is going to have. Because the only way to stop risk is to cut off the internet. And obviously we can't do that, because then we can't leverage all the great technologies and deliver the care that our patients expect.
Yep. And then one of the other techniques that are being used out there is purposely sending safe phishing emails to see if staff open it up or if they report it. And that's one of the ways that they figure out whether or not someone's a risky individual or not. So
yeah, absolutely. Great call out, Eric. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what resilience looks like, and I'll piggyback on what Eric just said too about the training, where I've got a dear friend who is an executive at a healthcare system who they have made cyber and awareness, cybersecurity awareness, as a part of their culture. So in everything they do, as they're building a data lake for connected systems, they're working to improve the workflows for the clinicians. security is always top of mind and integrated into every conversation of either improving existing deployment or some new innovative solution to improve the connected care. So having it a part of culture is critical. And so from a overall perspective, resilience, the zero trust architecture or any other standard framework, like let's say NIST CSF, that is a critical way to view your environment, right? Is to use some of these standard frameworks like zero trust, having encrypted unified communications. You heard a couple examples of that. And just one little tidbit too, as a part of your business continuity disaster recovery plan. What happens if your systems for communication go down? What is your backup plan? Do you have an analog system that you could use? Because if it's a digital system, there's a chance your hackers are in there too. So it's having those layered options and having encrypted unified communications is critical. Automated failover systems. So you heard the real world example of how we've automated network failover across multiple redundant circuit links so that that internet stays up, the 5 nines, right? 99.999% uptime. But then it's not just about your networks, it's also about your workflows, your systems. So your EHR, do you have an automated way to flip that over into that isolated recovery environment and build back up? Do you have automated cyber tools like a managed detection response, automating everything you can so that you can improve the performance. And then also that frees up your most valuable resources to do more strategic things. And of course, from a clinician standpoint, to be engaged directly with the patients effectively, because we've automated these systems and we've automated the failover. Continuous monitoring and compliance, as mentioned, it's, every day there's always something that's going to try and impact the way you could deliver care. And so just monitoring and having a system in place, right, to understand, as an organization, this is what our monitoring stance is. And then this is how we're maintaining compliance. So I was having a conversation with the CIO earlier this morning. It's about living in reality, right? What is the reality of your environment? What's the reality of the experience today, so that we could, continue to improve and focus on the priorities that matter most to our hospital systems. We already said the documented and practiced continuity plan, so I won't sit on that. And then the end user awareness piece, everybody has a huge impact on the organization. End users are the weakest link. We need to protect them from themselves. And so having that overall protection of the environment, to have the plans in place to be able to restore if and when things happen, and then to automate as much as you possibly can is the key.
So we'll talk
ahead,
about
Eric.
some of the Cox Business Solutions, and we won't talk about like every single thing that we do, but we want to make sure that you understand that there are certain overarching ideas and minimums that are pretty much guaranteed when we're working with different customers, and we want to make sure that it's high speed, low latency. That that is first and foremost one of the critical aspects, making sure that data gets from point A to point B incredibly fast. No kind of like Netflix wheel spinning kind of thing going on. And I've seen facilities where they would send a medical record and it would take hours because of slow connectivity, because they were using actually a T1, a copper T1, or bonded T1s actually at the time. So then if something got interrupted, that they would have to start all over again. But that's not the case when you have what we were talking about before with redundancy and fast fiber. Those are all critical backbone kind of needs of hospitals in today's world. Making sure that your medical technology, anything that's hitting the internet, is safe and secure and isn't going to be able to be accessed from outside of the hospital or outside of like those that you would trust to be able to access those machines from over the internet, or doctors working remotely. Not everyone is able to have their own IT department like dedicated to security. So being able to leverage IT experts who do security day in and day out, live, breathe, think security, so that way you don't have to. And that's something where we're able to take that load off of your shoulders, and that way if you are getting attacked, it's not really your shoulders. It is your shoulders, but you're able to pick up that phone call, pick up that phone, give us a call, and we're there holding your hand and ensuring that everything's being moved to where it needs to be moved. So malicious actions aren't happening within the actual network itself. It's happening in some kind of like sandbox. But making sure that your patients, your doctors, your staff are all in a secured facility and records being safe. The other one of the other big things that we do at our core is video and TV, being able to stream games. Like I mentioned that earlier. One of the creature comforts that if you're lying, resting, trying to recover from some kind of surgery, being able to see your favorite sports team, being able to take your mind off of the throbbing pain or piercing pain that's going through your body because you're able to cheer for your college football team, your favorite golfer, whatever it may be. Those kinds of things are really invaluable to patient happiness. Being able to use technology to its fullest is really one of the critical goals. The technology that we will employ is something that's going to enable further actions, whether it's with your electronic health records or other, introducing new higher bandwidth needing machines. Every year, these electronic medical imaging technology is getting higher resolution, and with higher resolution becomes bigger and bigger files. Take the higher resolution, now you make it video. And guess what? Now you're talking about giant files that need to be supported. So making sure that you have that technology to be able to support those so that you can, push growth for your facility. And that way, there's no limit, no capacity to what you put onto that network, and enable success for your doctors, for your nurses, and for your patients.
And I'll just add on high level before we get to Q&A here is, we help you do more with less, right? We solve critical challenges. Like we all know we have budget challenges. There's been changes to a lot of core systems and applications and platforms like VMware and Citrix, and we have anticipated HIPAA compliance enhancements coming down the road. We could help with each one of those, and we could help you do more with less. And we do it by meeting you where you are, aligning with your priorities, and delivering best-in-class experiences. And with that, I think we're headed to Q&A. Oh, no, we're doing testimonial. Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
Yep, we got a testimonial first right here. And this is Brandon Crawford. He's the Director of Technical Services of the Live View Group. If you're unfamiliar with that organization, it's a great one that provides behavioral health care, child welfare support, and employment services for people with disabilities. And they have 2,500 team members across the 13 states and the District of Columbia.
Hospital that's already there. Our experiences with Cox and Rapid Scale have been absolutely phenomenal. We've had zero issues bringing any of these
Oops, sorry about that.
Technologies into play that Cox and Rapid Scale have provided for us. They have the experience to help us understand our needs and provide those services to us. Their agility and ability to do things for us quickly has just been a game changer. When we had to essentially greenfield our environment and start over from the beginning, Cox was able to deliver services to us reliably, redundantly, and just no issues. We've had no problems with our connectivity with Cox.
And Miles, on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, and appreciate that, Eric, and always great to hear directly from our customers, what experiences we deliver to them. And so just a call to action for everybody in this room, you're going to have our contact info after this session. Reach out to us if you need any help, you want to discuss your environment, talk through anything specific to what you're looking for, and you want to do it in that type of environment, reach out, we're here to help you. So with that, Kayla, I'm going to hand it over to you to help facilitate Q&A for us.
Thanks, Miles. Yes, we will now begin the Q&A portion of today's webinar. As a reminder to our audience, you may submit your questions to our speakers using the Q&A feature you see on your screen. Our speakers will answer as many questions as possible in the time remaining. Any questions that are unable to be answered will be shared with the speakers for follow-up offline. So we will now start the first question here. How do you handle compliance in a hybrid environment?
Yeah, I'll jump in this one, and Eric, feel free to add in. Compliance in a hybrid environment is challenging, just like any other environment. And kind of mentioned before, it sounds like this is one of the newer architectures, right, where we are today, which is, you've got your on-prem, you've got some private colo, and you've got some public cloud infrastructure as well too. So my recommendations for handling compliance within that hybrid environment is you have to maintain the monitoring and controls, both or all three, from your on-prem colo and from your public cloud. And you have to look at it from the perimeter, right? All of your networking, and then within those environments too. So there has to be a clear assessment, a frequent check to ensure compliance. And then kind of back to living in reality, right? So having a third party come in and do, pen testing, compliance assessments, that's always a valuable resource, so that, you have a check and balance in place to make sure that you're doing everything you can to be compliant in a hybrid environment.
Great. All right. Thank you. The next question here. How are providers navigating the continued increase of throughput and need for secure connectivity?
So Eric, I'm going to let you jump on that one if that's okay.
Yeah, so this goes back to different types of connectivity, and fiber being the primary example. With fiber, it is pretty much infinitely scalable, and that allows for fast transfer of data from one place to another. There's also something called software-defined wide area networks, or SD-WANs, where if you have multiple facilities and you want them to talk to each other, but you don't have a physical circuit going from one hospital to the other campus or location, you could use SD-WAN networking to go use the internet to create a private connection between those two facilities. So that way you can remain HIPAA and FERPA compliant, because otherwise you're just not allowed to just push through everything through the internet. That wouldn't be considered safe, it wouldn't be secure, and it would be a violation of HIPAA and FERPA. So you want to avoid that by doing either point-to-point connectivity between locations, or a software-defined wide area network would be a great solution for that.
Great, thank you. Next question here. Do you have any recommendations on what to do if leadership isn't providing enough funding cybersecurity defenses?
Yeah, so that's a really tough one. It's a great one, but it's a really tough one because somehow like everyone finds the money to figure out how to remediate something after it happens, but it's a fraction of the cost to put in the prevention measures instead of remediation measures. So a couple things come to mind. The first is, if you are comfortable with this, this one puts you out there, which would be, identifying what risks you have and then emailing your superiors, the CEO, the board of directors, and say, here are our current risks. And until we get funding to purchase X, Y, or Z kind of services to mitigate these risks, this sorts of data will be at risk. And having that written is kind of like a CYA on your end. It can be a very uncomfortable conversation, but it's something that they can't ignore it once it's in writing. And and if it's also if it's a public facility, that email will be potentially publicly, or it could be publicly produced. But that is you going on record and saying, I see an issue, I need funding, and right now I'm not getting the support for it. So by putting it down in writing, that is one measure to take a step in the right direction. The other would be stay abreast of all the different headlines out there. Find hospitals that, or unfortunately, it's becoming way too frequent, but hospitals that are being attacked and what it's costing them to remediate and fix and deal with the fallout of being down for 3 days, 4 days. Miles gave the stats about how much it costs when you're down for a day. But make sure that sees the light of day, so that way people understand what is truly at risk.
And then I'll just add two other suggestions too from experience. Is one, look at it from a TCO, so the total cost of ownership modeling perspective, where you look at your layered cyber and your security tools and set, and then you also incorporate into that, the timeline that you're looking at and the impact of the reduction in downtime, reduction in risk, all of that. But ultimately, it's a TCO modeling exercise. And then the other part too is as you're deploying innovative solutions, or you have new initiatives that the IT group or technology group is working on, is that you incorporate the cyber resiliency into that initiative. So you're always baking it into every initiative that you're deploying, and then over time that continues to enhance your cybersecurity posture.
And we still have questions coming in, but I know we're also getting close to the top of the hour. I'm going to put our contact information up, but we'll continue with the questions.
Yes. Thanks, Eric. Yes, another question coming through the chat. Are you able to speak to the balance between security features and usability of product? How to find the sweet spot that doesn't cognitively fatigue users?
Yeah, I'll jump in first on this one. That's a great question. I kind of mentioned too, right? The way you're secured is you just unplug everything, right? But that doesn't work. We have to have that sweet spot, and ultimately, it's just an ongoing balancing exercise. The way I always approach it, and we approach it as an organization, is we think about the end user workflow experience. How many do they have to log in multiple times? Is their authentication seamless? Are we using single sign-on? Are we using all of the advanced tools that are available on, let's say, Microsoft P2, that are going to give you the cyber security protection, but then also it's going to streamline a lot of your authentication. Are you using think about, like, from a collision tech standpoint, tap and go. There's so ultimately it's looking at the end user workflow, the end user experience, and then continuously improving that, but then making sure you maintain that baseline level of cybersecurity.
And one probably less talked about strategy would be going a little aggressive to start with, and then dialing it back to where you really wanted it to be, to give the impression that you're hearing the concerns and trying to relieve the burden. Because we can lock this thing down, but it is going to be a really, really terrible experience for the end user. So to your point, finding that sweet spot, it's definitely a bargain and negotiation between the federal requirements and your own hospital's risk tolerance.
Great, thank you. Looks like we have time for maybe one more question here. Are you able to address intuitive design of software involved? This decreases need for training time, especially if leadership is not providing enough time to do proper training.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. Ultimately, we know we have generally hundreds of applications that are in our environment. And so, do you have control and authority over each one of them? No, not necessarily, but there may be some that you have control and authority over. And then that goes through your DevOps team, and just continuously focusing on them and making sure that they're focused on the end user experience and how they deploy. The other part too, and one of the suggestions for addressing this is going back to the data lake and how we're doing data correlations, insights, and then providing those insights to the end users in a very effective and efficient way. That's one way to help out too, where it's, you're really anticipating what the end user is looking for. You're using the data correlation, automation, potentially AI, in order to give that end user a better experience. And that also helps with your fatigue. And then, we all know better end user experience is going to provide a better patient experience too.
And I'll add on to that is, talk to your peers. Like, if you don't have a good peer network, it is absolutely invaluable to create one. Being able to learn from what they've done in the past and hear, this worked, this didn't work, stay away from this. a lot of people have already been through this kind of exercise, and it'll be much less effort to learn from someone else's mistakes, learnings, than for you to totally recreate the wheel.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. That does conclude the time we have for questions today. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers for their time and excellent presentation. And thank you again to our sponsor, Cox Business. In the next few days, all attendees will receive an email that will include a link to the archived webinar session. We also welcome you to complete the post-webinar survey. We thank you again for joining us today. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.